Hello everyone, welcome to the forum. My name is Siham Awada Jaafar and I'm the host of this wonderful show here at MEA TV in Troy, Michigan, and my guest today is Dr. Mary Assel. Welcome, Mary, to MEA and the forum. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Mary, this is a sort of a two-part. So today we want to talk about grief and how people deal with grief. And unfortunately, that's a reality of life, and we all are going to pass that stage in our lives. So I know that you have some personal experience with this that you're going to share with us. But you were also the director of the English Language Institute at Henry Ford College as well. And your resume spans. When I was reading it, I was thinking, oh my goodness, I've known you forever, but just the depth of what you do and the things that you have done is just amazing. And I thought, I have to have a conversation with this phenomenal human being. You wrote a book. It's called The Sprinkle of Dust, and that's really a personal memoir of your own experience and your own challenges that you've had in your life, and story of loss. And I think people have such a hard time with death, with loss, but we all are there sometime, somewhere in our lives. So tell us your story. I know it was about your son, Mazen, who passed away at a later age. So tell us about that, and tell us the chronological order of how you dealt with it and the time factor in which you had to deal with it.
Well, first off, he was my best friend, and not only was he a son, because I was 16 when I had him, and we basically grew up together. And when he married and was happily married and had children, 3 children, and everything was going nice and smooth in his life, of course, you and I cannot predict, no one can predict what might happen from day to day. And he was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor and told he had 2 weeks to live from the day he was diagnosed. I think one of the main reasons I wrote my memoir is to explain to people that really you don't have to just take that 2-week wording from the doctor, go write your will, and accept that and live with that. And of course, I know women in this country have more rights than the mother would have in terms of taking care of her husband. But I was very lucky that my daughter-in-law looked at me and said, you have the green light, do whatever you want, just make sure that we can save him. With that said, I did my research. We do as much as we can. I mean, I'm a doctor in education. I'm not a doctor in brain tumors. And so it was difficult, but I still went to medical school, even after my son was diagnosed, to take classes on neurology and understand more of the brain and what was happening to my son. But in the meantime, I wasn't going to watch them kill him by injecting him with morphine, which was, to them, was a mercy way of taking him out. But to me, I couldn't watch my son die that way.
And you had 2 weeks from diagnosis to saying that he was going to pass in 2 weeks.
Right.
That's an incredible story.
Right. And so I ran from one hospital to another.
So you were educating yourself as to what this meant and what options there were.
I had to. I figured if someone's going to tell me my son's going to go in 2 weeks,
you need
and
to
I'm looking
move
at children,
quickly.
3 little children, and a wife that's suffering because of all this, and I had previously lost my first husband, and I know what it was like to lose a husband. So I wanted to help. I wanted to keep my son alive, and so I became my own advocate. And I finally, when they said it was an inoperable brain tumor, I still went ahead and I insisted that we operate, that we not give him any morphine, and it worked. And they did immunotherapy, which is an excellent way to help. And many men who were much older than my son survived. But it worked for Mazen for a year. And unfortunately, after that, his health started deteriorating. I want to say the last 6 months of his life, he was mostly bedridden, and it was difficult on all of us. But at
But you
least
still
I
had
gave
him for 2 years.
I gave him that extra time with his two little ones. She was able to, the oldest girl, Yasmin, was able to connect with her dad. His son was able to kind of remember him, but the baby, of course, could not. But the point I'm making is, I went to brain tumor conferences. I went everywhere around the country. I even went to, when I gave up on science after I noticed everything was gone, I went to, I don't know what they call it, curaniera, something where they cure the disease through faith. And so this is a Mexican woman who lived in the outskirts of Tijuana, somewhere around that area, and we drove down, and I went to her, and some people told me it'll work, you know, if just give her something that he would wear. So I gave her his shirt, and after maybe about 20 minutes, she looked at me and said, you know, I will pray for your son. I tried to offer her money. She wouldn't take it. She said that it kind of gave me the word that my son wasn't going to make it. So
I think you tried everything.
Yeah,
sometimes when you're in that situation, you just want to know.
Everything. You try it all.
Science, faith.
But the point is,
energy.
I never gave up, you know, to the very end. And then, of course, comes his passing.
And his passing was really your inspiration to this book. It's called A Sprinkle of Dust, A Mother's Struggle with Loss and Healing. And in this book, you talk about the stages of grief and really how to deal with it, how to come to that last stage of acceptance. So talk us through that journey. I mean, there's the stages of grief, which are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. And I think everybody has to go through those stages to be able to continue on, because they have to. I mean, they have no choice.
Well, most of us do go through those stages. Some don't. Some may have different stages of grief, but the majority of people, according to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, go through these stages of grief. And to me, yes, there is denial. Well, in a way, I couldn't deny because I watched them trying
it was there. Right.
You know, he was in front of me, and I was reading. I mean, you have to read. It's in front of you. You're reading. You understand. And I knew I couldn't deny for very long but I did deny the fact that he was going to die in 2 weeks. You know, I didn't want to believe the doctor there. Maybe I prolonged it, but the matter was a given matter.
Right. Absolutely.
It was a fatal brain tumor, and there is no way around that. So he passed. And I had a hard time with that because I didn't know where he went. You know, you question, where is he? Where did he go?
You question your faith, your inner being.
Is he still around me? Is he still here? As much as I hurt when I lost his dad, I kind of just assumed his dad was sitting in heaven or purgatory somewhere waiting, you know. But with my son, I'm like, no, maybe he's still with me. Maybe he's still surrounding me. So, yeah, I would see his picture, his image in the sky. I would hear his voice talking to me. I think there's more of a deeper connection with your child that it's hard to let go of that. And so I became, after, you know, a certain time, very angry with the world, very angry with everyone. And then I started to think, okay, well, let me see. Maybe if I do this, God will help me do that. I started bargaining. Maybe if I be a good person, then maybe and my son goes to heaven, then maybe I'll go to heaven with him. And here I am bargaining and thinking, well, maybe the bargaining part didn't work too well.
And I think that part too encompasses well, what if I did this? Maybe I'd have that result. And I think, you know, it sort of gives you like that false hope of maybe if I did this, things could change. And you know, your time part, you know, the concept of time is a little bit different too.
Right.
So that's a very dangerous part of the grieving process.
Yeah, part to be in. And the other thing too is it took me to reincarnation, you know, and I'm like, well, are we going to be reincarnated? And if I'm going to be, but we're not, because as a Muslim, I don't believe I'm going to be reincarnated, but maybe he will be, maybe I will be. You know, all these doubts that
Right.
start going through your mind.
Things you start thinking
reading
of.
the Old Testament, reading the New Testament, reading all kinds of books, trying to help myself understand where he is, what happened, why do we live, why do we die, you know, all of the above. And it was hard.
And why do bad things happen to good people?
Exactly, and I read that book too. But and Kushner, I mean, he went through the same thing, and daily prayers and recitations and supplications and things like that that would help me go through it, but not necessarily end the grief part of it. And so I kind of fell into a depression. The doctors, of course, the first thing they want to do is give
you medicine,
Prozac or whatever it is, antidepressant that they can give you. And to me, I wasn't against it. So there was one that I took that was, I think it was Wellbutrin or something, and I took that. I took that for 3 good years, hoping that it would make me feel better and hoping that I would be able to, and it did. It didn't make me drowsy or anything. It just made me neutral, kind of like.
Right, and it's that chemical reaction too.
Right.
That
And then I said to myself, well, I can't live on this forever. I mean, I do want to let go of all these pills. I don't want to take this every day. And so I went out of the depression into finding other ways to accept it. And so I joined grief groups. I talked to people, read all the books I could read. Would travel and talk to people who had lost their children and try to understand how they're coping, knowing I'm not the only mother in the world that lost a child. I mean, that's something happening every day, every minute of the day to every other person, God knows who. So I learned to say to myself, okay, you have to accept this. And how do I accept it? I accepted it by when someone would come up to me and tell me, well, how are you dealing with this? How can you survive? How can you cope? Well, what can I do? Do I have a choice? I really don't have a choice. And this is something that's going to be imposed on almost every person in this world. If you're not going to lose a son, you're going to lose a mother and a father. And honestly, the loss of a mother is very difficult,
absolutely.
too. You know, I lost my mother last year, and I don't know if it was because I was, you know, after I retired, I became her caregiver, but it's hard too, you know. I mean, you feel like you're losing part of your root,
Sure.
part of who you are, part of your connection, and somebody uprooted you and said no. And so the loss of a child is part like losing one of your limbs, like losing part of you. It's something from you that goes away. The loss of your mother is like losing
right.
your life. You know, losing your historic background, where you came from, and the father too, but more
But
so.
I also think, I mean, you know, I've really been able to reflect on this quite a bit, and I think, you know, loss is a part of life. Death is a part of life. It's the chronological order that we will all go through. And when they say the only thing that's, you know, permanent is taxes and death, you got to believe it, because those are the 2 constants that will never, ever change. And yet, the concept of death is the most difficult thing to accept in life. And so you do want to question things. You want to question why we're put in this situation,
Right.
why things happen,
Right.
and it's very
Right.
difficult. You know, we talked about this earlier in regards to suicide. And you know, the purposeful oncoming of death under one's hands, and that's so difficult for people around them to deal with and to accept, because they're gone. You know, they've passed on to whatever realm, you know, in terms of what your faith is or what your ideology is about death. But it's the people that are here, and how do they cope with that? Because I would think that the bargaining kind of phase would be like, what if, or what if I said this, or what if I did this, or would that have happened, or why did this person, you know, do what they did? And also within, you know, the mental health within our community, more so within the Arab American community, has been a taboo, and I think that's changing. But that's such a, you know, concept to really think about.
Right.
So how do, I mean, with your situation, it was a brain tumor, and there was, I mean, that was inevitable, and I don't want to say that it was, an act of God or what have you, but it was a natural process. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can possibly, figure out in order to see that coming. It's just something that you have to accept and move forward. But those that commit suicide, and because of a mental issue, and it's a chemical imbalance, we know that, a lot of individuals. Are there tools for parents to deal with this? I mean, you mentioned a whole bunch, resources and help groups and things like that, and it's important for people to know that it's okay to go and do those things.
It's perfectly okay, and as an educator, from I'll just talk to you about suicide from that perspective.
Yes.
You have a lot of young people, but believe it or not, there's a lot of people in their 60s and 70s who also commit suicide. You would think mostly younger people, but it is a large group of young teenagers who, between the ages of sometimes 15, sometimes even younger, commit suicide. And yes, what is the mother and father, what do they go through? The guilt.
Right.
I mean, I lost mine to a natural cause, and I went through a guilt trip. Why am I still here? So if I were to lose mine through suicide, I would probably ask myself, well, what did I do wrong? And in reality, I don't think the parent did anything wrong in that respect, other than to look for the signs.
And again, it's almost a physical process too. It's almost a natural process because, and it was put in a very, a different perspective where, people do die of cancer, and yet mental health is a disease as well. Do you know what I'm saying? So in that aspect, it is definitely, a natural process. And, and just like, sometimes. Cancer is not curable. It's
and
sort of the
mental
same
health
thing.
can be cured. There's the difference between terminal cancer and mental health. We can work with
But if you don't
mental
catch
health.
it in time.
If you don't catch it in time,
Right.
it'll be
So it's
too
this.
late.
It's sort of the same kind of idea.
And that's why the parents and schools, honestly, not just the parents, teachers and other students who advocate for other children who are suffering, not like bullycide, which a lot of kids are committing suicide because they were bullied, and other children are just standing there watching,
Right.
and not interfering. And to me, that's where we're all making a mistake. Parents should notice when their child is being bullied or their child is depressed, or that's where, catch it before it's too late. Because once it's too late, you're going to think, well, it's my fault I didn't catch it. Well, sometimes you don't always see it.
And kids are really good at hiding things from their parents.
Yeah, sometimes you don't always see it. Sometimes
Right.
it's there and you didn't see it because you're busy at work or whatever. But I don't honestly think it's sometimes the parents more than I do. It could be peer pressure. Right. It could be the child not doing well in a relationship or in school, or God knows what
or a chemical imbalance, and we want to really talk about that too. And it's a lot of a cultural issue too,
right?
In terms of how culturally it's interpreted, and mental health and everything else. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a break right now, and we'll be right back, and we're going to talk about culture and how that's perceived, and we want to talk about women as well in terms of the cultural stereotypes and what we're dealing with right now, environmentally speaking as well, and what's going on politically speaking in regards to women's issues. Those are all important, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the forum, and we're here with Dr. Mary Assel. And earlier we were talking about mental health, and really want to focus in really on more the cultural aspect. And I want to talk about women in our community as well, and culturally speaking and realistically speaking, how all that is balanced. But in terms of mental health, I know in the Arab American community in general, it's still a stigma. And I think in society in general, it's still a stigma. But it's so important to be able to recognize the signs of mental health and when a loved one needs help, and to intervene. So how do we go over that cultural stigma and be honest and get the help that these individuals need?
Well, first of all, you have to accept the fact, or once you're convinced that something is wrong with the child, and the child does need additional help or psychiatric assistance or testing or whatever it takes, to move forward with that. Not to say, well, you know what, then nobody will ever look at me the same way and they'll say something's wrong with my kid, and I don't want anyone to say something's wrong with my kid. But you're really looking at what can you do to help your child, not to say something's wrong with my child. You're
Right.
going to fix whatever problem. And yes, they do. There is a chemical imbalance. You have children with ADHD. You have children who are autistic. You have children who are kind of like low IQ, only because maybe it's something that happened early and they banged their head against. I mean, I had a student who banged her head against the wall during the war in Lebanon, that by the time she came to my class, she had all kinds of seizures, epileptic seizures. So there's something going on. And unless we as adults, whether we're teachers, educators, parents, whoever we are, recognize this and try to help the person who's coming from this other culture, who see it to be,
A shame.
they
it's
think of it
not.
as a stigma that my
Right.
child is not normal, my child is not right. They need to continue and to take that child to see a doctor,
Professional.
a professional who will give them the right prescription if needed. Now, that doesn't mean that every time a child acts up, he's
Right, or they need
ADD,
medication
or
right
they
away.
need- because
That's another show.
Right,
Yeah.
because a lot of teachers have the tendency to say, oh, well, you know what, take your kid, something's wrong, he's ADHD. No, he's not. Because if he is, there's 25 different forms of ADHD. Now, which one are you picking? So you don't necessarily label each child to be mentally impaired. But then again, you get the ones that that go through life, and sometimes at the early age of 7 or 8 or 9. I mean, this one woman, her daughter was 6 years old, and she committed suicide.
The daughter?
The daughter.
At 6 years old? How much pain does a 6-year-old have to be going through?
Howell, Michigan. She she hung herself somewhere in the closet. I don't know what she did, but this is a 6-year-old girl. And then you've got 7 and 8 and 9 and children who do these things. And I don't think the parent has had enough time with this child to blame himself and say it's my fault.
Yeah, it's
it
never.
Could be something out of from the outer circle. So all that needs to be taken.
And I really think, we talked about this earlier too off camera, that I think the things that these kids are being exposed to are so much beyond what their mental capacity can process, that we're seeing, the sexual abuses by 13, 14-year-old boys against younger girls. And I don't think we've really seen that in the past, but we're seeing it now more so than ever. And I think that, again, the exposure of what is out there through the internet, through what's at their fingertips right now, is something that they're being exposed to that they can't process in terms of their age level and in terms of their development, their brain development, their their ability to decipher what's going on in front of them. Because a 6-year-old girl to have committed suicide must have been, there must have been some outer things. So I think a lot, maybe, in terms of parents, they have to be very strict in regards to what their kids are looking at, what they're seeing on their phone. But with the phone, it's so difficult.
They have to be on top of things. Everyone telling me, well, you're paranoid. Well, yeah, it's not a matter of being paranoid. I want to know exactly where my kid is every minute of the day. Even if he's playing in the backyard, I may be sitting in the backyard with him, and I don't care how old he is, because that's just me.
Right.
But not every parent is like me, and a lot of people, I watch the younger generation raise their kids, and out they go, out the door they go on their bikes, and I'm like, oh my God, I would be worried, especially nowadays, I would be worried.
It's scary
to death.
You have to trust, but there's a saying, trust in God, but tie your camel. So you want to trust in God, but make sure your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed.
Yeah,
so
I like that. Then that's true, and you just have to say to yourself, what do I do to make my child more comfortable, and what do I do to make my life more comfortable, and then make sure, of course, that everyone around your child is not impacting him or her in a negative way.
Absolutely. So we wanted to talk a little bit about and I know you've gone to a lot of conferences, you've spoken a lot about the cultural stereotypes of women in general, and also women's rights and things like that. And right now, with the Me Too movement and the debate about abortion, I mean, here we go. We're going sort of reversing a little bit. So, how do we address this as women, and how do we? I don't want an individual, or even the government or Congress or the Senate to make decisions about what I'm going to be able to do with my body or not. Even though I'm beyond that, but still, as as women in general, you want to make sure that is preserved. What do we do? How do we make our voice heard?
Well, we do make it heard by
I know.
we speak up. One thing and I love my husband for this. One thing he said to me when I was doing something, I was upset and I was wondering why he was asking me all kinds of questions, and then when I spoke up, he said, why did it take you so long? And he's right. I mean, why do we allow it? We are to speak up so it will not happen. If they want to go to the Roe versus Wade and try to take us back to 1850 and create a lot of chaos in this country, it's going to happen, because women barely have equal rights now. We have equal rights, but not the way they should be. We can do a lot of things, but we're still not getting paid what men are getting paid. We're not getting treated the way men are getting treated. Young girls are on college campuses are getting raped, and they're still being told, well, hide, go sit in your room. And
I like that example that you gave earlier. I want you to share that.
Yeah, okay. Well, when, one of the first things they told the girls is go sit in your rooms, and no girls out walking on campus at night. There's a curfew and go sit in your room. And then another college said, no, wait a minute. Why are the girls sitting in their room? We're going to get the boys to sit in their rooms.
I love it.
And the girls can get up and walk out at night.
Right, because it's really, even though, men and women both are subjected to, whatever, but statistically speaking, it's more of the women. So why would the women have to be punished for something that
the men are doing?
Yeah, the perpetrator
and the protest by the men was a lot stronger than the protest by the women. When the women were told to go sit in their dorms and stay away at after certain hours, the men protested when they were told they had to. Oh, why do we have to go? Well, because,
Right, absolutely.
There's something going on here, and it's a two-way street. It takes two to tango, and if one of you have to go away, whether it's you or her, one of you have to be sitting in the room for something not to happen. But that's beside the point. The point here I'm trying to make is so many people got away with a lot of what they were doing, like this CEO from France who raped this maid in the hotel nine years ago, and practically got away with it until they dragged him off the plane, and down goes. It's a lot of things in the Me Too movement. I totally agree with all these women who are finally speaking up, finally able to say. It took me, when I was almost raped at the age of 13, it took me, I think I was 25 or 26 years old, when the man died that did that to me. My mother said, I go, great. I got up and I started dancing, and she's like, why are you dancing? This man just died. He's someone we know. And I said, Ma, I never told you, but this is what he did. I was afraid to speak up. I didn't want to say what I was afraid of what she might do. Maybe it would be my fault. Maybe she's going to blame me. Maybe she said, you shouldn't be walking around a man like that, or whatever. But I was afraid. And now with the Me Too movement, thank God these girls aren't afraid anymore. Thank God they're speaking up. Thank God they're saying what they need to say to stop people from treating women like that. Even in the school system, a man looked at me and started saying things to me when I was in my mid-30s. And other women were saying, Mary, speak up. And I'm like, no, I'm afraid to speak up. Finally, I'm like,
this isn't going to happen anymore.
Today, I'm going to speak up. This isn't going to happen. It cannot continue to happen. Why are they doing this? Why do they think we're a property, personal property? No.
I work for you. I'm not your personal property. I'm married to you. I'm not your personal property. I'm your daughter. I'm not your personal property. Everyone has wings and they have to fly. And these women have to fly. They have to move on. And that's what we want to teach our daughters. That's what do we do about? We teach our girls. We teach our daughters not to be submissive, not to say yes, sir. We don't need that mentality anymore. And a lot of men, and I respect them for that, I really do. A lot of men show me how women can obtain their freedom, and what are the ways that they can change things that are happening in their lives that will make it more acceptable to the other party, to the other sex. Only because they are more understanding. They honestly, gay men are my best friends. You know why?
They're phenomenal.
They're phenomenal. I understand them and they understand me, and I'm like, how can you know? I mean, these are really,
how do
really
we change
nice
things
people.
from their
you look
insight
at them,
and
yes,
approach?
they're men, but they're wonderful men. You
Right.
understand how to. They talk to you in a way that you're like, wow.
They get it.
You know, they get it. Yeah, they understand. And so to me, I'm like, why can't we teach our sons and daughters the same thing? I have a son, a living son right now, who tells me, Ma, Dad doesn't know how to talk to you. Let me talk to you. You know, and so sometimes he teaches his father how to talk to me, and even though his father is very good, but he teaches his father. You go, this is how you talk to a woman. This is how a woman should be treated. And I'm taking credit for something that I kind of told him, this is how women should be treated. This is what you teach your children to do. It's not she has a role and he has a role in life. We
Right.
have equal roles.
Right.
You know, you come home, you're tired.
It's a partnership. It's
Your
a
partnership in life. And you teach your daughters to do that, you know, to accept that and move forward. It's not like, I mean, my agreement with my husband is, okay, you do outside, I do inside. Because I don't like to do
well, that's an agreement.
I don't like to
Sure.
mow the lawn. And he doesn't like to wash dishes, so I'll do you know what I'm saying? So it's you commit.
Right, those kinds of roles,
Yeah,
you know, you
yeah.
just sort of, you know, but it's a partnership. You're
It's a
absolutely
partnership,
right, and it has
you
to
do
be that agreement.
And then when it comes to work, I always tell women, whether they come, because at the Institute, the English Language Institute, when we entertained, it was between 82 or 84 different nationalities. And you know what comes with nationalities.
Sure, cultural
Different cultures,
variations,
women.
interpretations that are different.
Right. Even Arab women talking to other Arab Muslim women, telling them, well, wait a minute, your scarf is not covering enough here. You have to bring it down a little bit more. Your veins are showing. And when I would step in and say, hey, wait a minute. Who are you to tell her what she can do and what she can't do? You know, and we go through those phases. And so we learned a lot about different women in different cultures. But I encouraged all these women, every woman that walked through my door was encouraged to move on, to even if she had children and she was married, to move on, to get a degree, to assert herself in the entire world around her, never to let anyone step on her, never to let anyone take away her right to become who she wants to become. And if she believes in her heart that that's what she can do, then she will do it. You know, it's what you believe that you can accomplish, and I strongly, strongly believe that. I really do.
And I do too. And I think you've been such an advocate too for women in general, and some, you know, the cultural stigma, especially. Let's talk about Arab women for just a few minutes, because I think the stereotypical kind of image of the Arab, especially Arab Muslim women, are they're submissive, or, you know, because they cover, you know, it's more of a controlling issue. So a lot of individuals who do cover, and that's part of their faith, and that's an individualized decision that they want to make. But we have people who are heads of state, people who are now superintendents, people who, you know, are very much into the fabric of you know, our life, our communities, our organizations, our companies. But that is their religious identity that they want to maintain, and yet they're not submissive. They're not, that stereotype and that role that people think. And so there's a lot of education to be given in regards to that whole entity.
Right. That said, the fact that there are women out there, whether they're from Yemen or Iraq or Iran or whatever, Iran's not an Arab country, but a Muslim country, no matter where they come from, of course they bring their culture with them, they bring their traditions with them, and the fathers and the brothers and whoever bring all that with them. And then you've got the extreme who commit acts of horror and acts of crime, and you say to yourself, well, that's just one out of God knows how many, but the majority of girls from Yemen, the majority of girls from Lebanon, the majority of girls from any country that I've known, whether they're wearing the scarf or not wearing the scarf, are moving in the right direction. They are finding themselves in a world where, especially in the United States, in a world where they can speak up, they can say what they want to say and do what they want to do, and no one will oppress them. No one will go and say anything negative against them. However, if this same girl would be in Saudi Arabia, and they had her on the news the other day too.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia is another.
I mean, it took God knows what to get her out of prison, and she was a journalist, and they got her out of prison, and she's in this country. She's able to exercise her rights and speak her mind and say what she wants to say, whereas that cannot exist in other countries. So we're not talking religion here, and this is the only thing I'm trying to make clear, is that it's not the religion that we need to attack, it's the culture, the tradition, the environment, the country, and not,
Absolutely, and a person's right to make choices for themselves. And I guess that sort of spans across the whole concept of, the Me Too movement, the abortion movement, the choices that we want to make for ourselves and how we want to identify ourselves in moving forward. And it's really about inclusion and acceptance.
Yes, it is.
Of
there
all
were many,
people.
many, many Arab women in history, if you go back in time, that were running countries. They were head of countries, and they were in charge. And it was, I don't think you can get a woman in charge today. I mean, if you take a look at a lot of the women in
well, in Michigan, we sort of swept it. So, I mean, there's...
with the superintendent.
We've got Governor Gretchen Whitmer. We've got Jocelyn Benson. We've got Dana Nessel.
Yes, we do.
There was one more other woman that
Rashida
Tlaib, Ilhan Omar. I mean, it's not just Muslim women, but women in general, and I think that tide, is changing a little bit, and we're having more of a voice, but we still have those challenges and those struggles that we need to deal with,
we will
and the stereotypes and the misconceptions. And so I think conversations like this, just to have that conversation and to make sure people are more open-minded and have that second, or third or fourth thought in regards to what they're seeing, why they're seeing it, and to make sure that they educate themselves to interpret it the right way. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being here. There's so much more to talk about. Will you come back and talk some more with us?
I really appreciate this. Thank you very much. Anytime. But thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Mary.
Thank you very much.
And thank you all for joining us here at the Forum, MEA TV, in Troy, Michigan. It's always a pleasure to have you as an audience, and we will see you next time.